So good to see you all. Um, welcome in to this special climate corps. I'm Luis Guerrero. I'm with the Sierra Club Rio Grande chapter of the legislative and political organizer with our chapter. Actually, I'm filling in for Camilla Feibovich. She was supposed to be running this one, but she got called into a last minute, very important thing to attend that had to do with the president. So, you know, I can't say no to the president related stuff. But we have a very great and very interesting topic today. We're going to be talking a little bit about chemical recycling. What are some of the myths and what is a reality with that? And before we get started, again, just want to thank you all for being here. Well, since we have three speakers, and then we have kind of a packed agenda. We're not going to have time to do introductions, but it would be really great if you could all maybe type in the chat your name, your pronouns, where you're from, and this is going to be interesting. What is one lie that you have heard about recycling in general? Just one lie you've heard. People say either against recycling or against any kind of I guess that kind of technology. I'm really curious to see what kind of stuff people would say. We'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to bring up our first speaker, Alexis Goldsmith, who is going to talk to us a little bit again about the subject of chemical recycling. So, Alexis, I'll let you introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and go ahead.
Thanks, Louise. And I'm just going to spotlight myself if that's okay, because I know you can kind of get lost in the grid. Hi, everybody. Really nice to meet you all. See you all here today. My name is Alexis Goldsmith, and I'm the organizing director at Beyond Plastics. We are a national nonprofit dedicated to ending plastic pollution. And lately, a lot of my work has been around this chemical recycling issue, which you are also facing in New Mexico. And we want to kind of bring you up to speed on what's going on a little bit. So here is my email, alexisgoldsmith@bennington.edu. If you want to reach out, that would be great. And our website, beyondplastics.org. We do have a lot of chemical recycling resources on our website as well. So let's set the stage here a little bit. We all know that plastic waste is a big problem, and plastic has become ubiquitous in our daily lives. We cannot get away from it. More than 40% of new plastic produced today is just for single-use packaging, like you see in this photo. So the average consumer has very little control actually over how much plastic they are using. And that is because the market is pumped full of this stuff by consumer brands and by the petrochemical industries that are producing the plastic in the first place. So the annual rate of production of new plastic is increasing every year. Globally, we're at about 400 million metric tons produced per year, and that is set to triple by 2060. And that means that more factories, more facilities are being built to produce new plastics from fossil fuels. So this is a key point here that I'm going to return to later in the presentation. But as you would expect, as production goes up, so does the amount of waste that we're generating. The US, these are the numbers from 2018, the most recent that we have from the EPA, but in 2021, the US threw out about 51 million metric tons of plastic waste. So that's a lot of plastic waste. And you may be surprised to know that the recycling rate, or you're probably not surprised to know that the recycling rate is not keeping up. The recycling rate for plastics in the United States is actually at less than 6%. These numbers are a little bit outdated, but we know that it's less than 6%. So mechanical recycling has been a major failure. And I would argue that plastics are unmanageable. They cannot be effectively recycled. They cannot be effectively collected and sorted, and so they are winding up in the environment where they're becoming ocean pollution, where they're posing major challenges for international communities, major social and environmental justice challenges. And every single person on Earth is now ingesting microplastics from plastic pollution in the environment because it's breaking down and getting into our water and our air and our food. So we have this conundrum, right? We have all of this plastic that is meant to be used for a very short time, and then it is thrown away where it persists in the environment for generations. So it just doesn't make sense to use a single use for a material that is meant to never break down to be used for single use items. So you would think that the logical solution to this is to just make less plastic. And that is what we at Beyond Plastics advocate for. We advocate for plastic bans on things like plastic bags, polystyrene, straws, all the items that we could be not using plastic for, and to redesign our packaging to not use plastic. But instead, the petrochemical industry says they have a solution to fix the plastic pollution crisis, and that is advanced recycling. Ooh, so mechanical recycling is not working. What about this technology they're calling advanced recycling or chemical recycling? So what is it? Well, there's been a lot of big flashy headlines about it. It says that they will be able to basically infinitely recycle plastics using this new technology. And they're announcing big investments in this technology. So pouring a lot of money into it. And major consumer brands that are responsible for a lot of the packaging that's in the marketplace are calling for chemically recycled plastic. Now remember this headline, because I'm going to come back to it later in the presentation, that consumer brands are calling for 800,000 tons of chemically recycled plastic. And now it's in New Mexico. So now we have Plastic Gas, which is a gasification company. They're turning plastic waste into fuel to be burned. And you have your governor, Governor Lujan Grisham. I'm sorry, I think I just pronounced her name wrong, but the governor cutting the ribbon at this plant. So we're seeing some state public support here for this plastic to fuel technology. So the bottom line here is that chemical recycling and advanced recycling are not turning plastics into new plastics. They are turning plastic waste into fuel to be burned. No matter what the headlines say, no matter if the companies are claiming they can turn it into new plastics, in practice, that's not what's happening. That may be able to be a lab setting or theoretically, but on a commercial scale, no chemical recycling plant has been able to turn plastic into new plastic. And this technology has been around for 30 years. So it's not new technology, and it doesn't really work for what they say it's going to do. So the issue here is that you have companies saying that they're going to solve the plastic crisis or the plastic waste crisis through advanced recycling, but it's not ever going to offset that production of new plastic from fossil fuels. So because production of new plastic from fossil fuels is increasing every year, the percentage of plastic that gets recycled decreases more and more. There's an inverse relationship there. And recycling for plastic will never work as long as it doesn't offset that new plastic production. So we know that recycling doesn't work. So brands and petrochemical companies and states are under pressure to fix the plastic waste crisis. But instead of saying, well, let's just ban plastics, let's turn it into fuel to be burned, which is not a good idea because it's very toxic, and also it doesn't stop the extraction of fossil fuels. So plastic burns really well because it's made from fossil fuels. And I know you have a lot of fracking in New Mexico. So a lot of plastics today are made from ethane gas, which comes from fracking, which is turned into polyethylene, either high density polyethylene or low density polyethylene. So things like Coke bottles and cling wrap. Now, turning plastic into fuel does not meet any international definition of recycling. The United States doesn't even have a definition of recycling. but it says explicitly the European Commission does not consider turning plastic into fuel or turning waste into fuel or for energy recovering to be recycling. Now, this process is really polluting. It releases large amounts of carbon dioxide emissions. So this is actually bad for the climate because you have to use fuel just to run the process. So to turn the plastic into the fuel, you need additional fossil fuels. So the carbon emissions, and this slide comes from the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. The carbon emissions are 2.5 times the input. So if you have 1 ton of plastic going in, you have 2.5 tons of carbon dioxide emissions. And that's because they're adding additional fuels to the process. And then the fuels that come out of the process actually need more processing in order to be burned. And that during that processing, some of the carbon that's in the fuel is lost. So you have things that are in the plastic being lost as carbon emissions. You have fuel being added that are being lost as carbon emissions. And the result is a very small amount of fuel for what's going in. And plastic gas says they have a 10-to-1 ratio of plastic waste going into fuel coming out. So for every 10 tons of plastic waste that goes in, 1 ton of fuel comes out. Now, this also applies to the toxins. So plastic has a lot of chemicals added to it. Some of the most infamous are bisphenol, BPA, bisphenol, I'm forgetting the A, I'm sorry, BPAs, polyfluorinated compounds, PFAS. You have heavy metals in the plastic, and that doesn't just disappear during the process. So it's either lost as air emissions, water effluent, it winds up in the toxic ash from the process because it is burning plastic during the process, or it's in the resulting fuel, which is then burned. So the toxins are a huge concern when it comes to chemical recycling. So the 3 major problems with the claims about chemical recycling are: 1, it's not recycling or circular, it's burning plastic. Number 2, the toxins in equal the toxins out, and you actually have less control over the toxins coming out as you do the toxins going in. And number 3, we can't recycle our way out of this problem. And I'm going to show some math to just prove why this doesn't work. So remember this headline that I mentioned earlier: major brands call for 800,000 metric tons of chemically recycled plastic by 2030, so by the end of this decade. That is 1.6% of all the plastic waste that the US threw away in 2021. So actually, this is worse than chemical recycling. This is worse than mechanical recycling, even if chemical recycling was turning plastic into new plastic, which we know that they're not. So I'm kind of being gracious here and saying, like, okay, let's suspend disbelief of their claims for just a minute. Yes, they can 1-to-1 turn plastic into plastic. It still is nowhere close to what we need to waste problem. So each of Plastic Gas, they have 5 plants. They are capable of processing 1 to 75 tons of plastic per day with, I mentioned, an output of 10-to-1. That's from News Bulletin. So that's about 27,000 tons of plastic per year they can process into fuel, and they get 2.7 tons of fuel out of it. The US is generating roughly 51 million tons of waste per year. So to deal with the amount of waste we're generating, we would need almost 2,000 of these plants, and that is just not practical. Not to mention, where did the other 46 million tons go? So if you put 51 million tons in, you get 5.1 million tons of fuel. The other 46 million tons are air emissions, very toxic air and climate emissions. Now, all major environmental groups agree that chemical recycling is incineration. It's not recycling. There's an excellent report out from the Natural Resources Defense Council called Recycling Lies that I would like to send to all of you. It's very short, but it is shocking. And I love this image from Gaia. Let the plastic industry take you for a ride, which is basically saying the plastic industry created the problem, so why should we trust them to solve the problem? So that is my presentation. Sorry if I had to rush through it, but I wanted to make sure we had enough time for the other speakers.
Oh no, absolutely. Thank you. That was really, really insightful. We're gonna, I know folks may have questions for Alexis. We're actually gonna hold off on questions until the end. Lori Zuner is gonna monitor and run our Q&A. So if you have questions, I don't know, write them down on a piece of paper or something, and then come. We'll come back to questions at the end. But thank you so much, Alexis, for just this really, really great presentation. Up next, we have Ana Rios with Moms Demand Action, who is going to talk to us a little bit more about the subject as well. And I don't know if you're ready to go.
Hi, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Ana Rios, and I am with Moms Cleaner Force. We are
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Moms in Action. It's okay. So I'm gonna share my screen. Please let me know if you can see my presentation. I'm trying to share it with no notes, but I don't know how it's not coming out.
There we go. Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you.
I can't see it. There we go.
Oh, somehow you muted yourself, Ana.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see my presentation? Okay, so as I was saying, I am Ana Rios. I am the field coordinator for Moms Cleaner Force in New Mexico with the program EcoMadres. And as you can see, as we said before, the petrochemical industry marketing scheme, advanced recycling, is just plastic incineration. The chemical industry wants to convince the EPA and states to reclassify plastic incineration as advanced recycling and manufacturing to avoid important pollution controls that help protect public health and the climate. The political pressure grows as states, currently 20, adopt laws to redefine plastic incineration as manufacturing and advanced recycling facilities, accepting them from stronger pollution regulations. We need to do what we can to ensure our state is not added to this list by educating ourselves and our elected officials on this topic, including the health risks of our communities. We know that burning plastic creates significant climate warming greenhouse gas pollution, while simultaneously releasing a host of toxic pollution known to impact health. Burning plastic moves the waste from the landfill to the polluting the air and directly into lungs. Living near plastic incinerator facilities can create the risk of cancer, birth defects, reproductive system damage, developmental issues, cardiovascular problems, respiratory problems, neurological problems, and more. Having plastic incineration reclassified and not regulated under the Clean Air Act will allow these facilities to emit harmful air pollution without any monitoring, reporting, or pollution control technologies. Many plastic waste incinerators are located in low-income communities and communities of color that are already overburdened by pollution. Communities located near plastic incinerators need the protections from the Clean Air Act. Here's the thing. Systematic racism has created that both side new facilities in communities of color and force certain families to live in places that are more susceptible to toxic air pollution. Latino, indigenous, Black, and low-income communities are among those who often face higher exposure to pollutants, and many experience greater negative health impacts as a result. This is environmental injustice from cradle to cradle. These populations have been and continue to be unjustly exposed to health threats for air pollution, and because where they live and where they go to school and workplaces. Children are especially vulnerable to air pollution. Children breathe faster than adults, so they inhale more air and can be exposed to more air pollution than adults for their body size. Children exercise more and spend more time outside than adults, which means that they can breathe more outdoor air pollution than any of us as adults. And children's lungs and brains are still developing. And developing lungs and brains are more sensitive to pollution than former young adults. Latinos tend to live where there is a greater exposure of air pollution. Latinos in the US are 3 times more likely to be negatively affected by air pollution because of where they live and work. 65 of Latinos live in areas that do not meet federal air quality standards, compared to 58% of whites. 1.81 million Latino people live within half a mile of oil and gas facilities. Language barriers and undocumented status can contribute to the apprehension of some Latinos to speak out about polluting industries. Air pollution causes or exacerbates almost all of the major health disparities experienced by indigenous people. Asthma, 13% of indigenous children have asthma, compared with 8.6 of children of non-indigenous descent. Indigenous people have higher risk of health problems such as adverse birth outcomes, asthma, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, cancers, and premature deaths than general population. What we can do? So first of all, advanced recycling is plastic incineration. I should not be exempted from the air pollution laws that apply to other incinerators. We should oppose any state efforts or legislation to rebrand it as recycling or manufacturing that will trigger exemptions from stronger pollution regulations. Plastic burning accelerates climate change, threatens public health, and perpetuates environmental justice. What we can do? I think it's very important to everyone to remind that we are 1 week from elections. So in conclusion, It will also like to remind you the important that this thing is to all our communities. So vote, please vote for candidates who believe in and take care of clean air, children's health, and environmental justice. All people are entitled to equal environment protections regardless race, color, nationality, or income. It is a human right to live, learn, work, and play in a clean environment. Thank you. And after this, I'm gonna share with you in the chat mom's petition for the EPA and the government to please do not allow the states to have this kind of facilities nearby our communities.
Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing that. That was gosh, that was so interesting. Thank you very much. And yeah, if folks can fill out that petition, I think that would be really, really great. I mean, we talk a lot about like the equity factor when it comes to any kind of pollution or environmental, and I mean, Anna, like everything you just said, just like it just struck a chord. Thank you so very much for sharing that. Up next, I think, do we have it? Oh yeah, I do see Graham on here. Up next we have Graham Hamilton. Graham, if you would like to bring yourself up and tell us a little bit about yourself, and yeah, go ahead.
Sure thing. Can you all hear me and see my screen okay?
Yes. Yep.
All right. Okay, if forgive me if it looks like I'm shivering, it's because I am. I'm having to take this call outside. It's about 30 degrees. But I'm going to get through this relatively quickly. My name is Graham Hamilton, and I serve as the U.S. Policy Officer for Break Free from Plastic. Break Free is a global movement made up of hundreds of organizations around the world who are working to confront plastic pollution at every step of the supply chain, from fossil extraction to refinery to consumer use and disposal. And if you would just kind of indulge me here, I've got a working title for this presentation, which some might find humorous, some might find offensive, but we'll just go with it anyways. But want to kind of just touch on the magical wonders of chemical recycling and lessons in advanced industry bullshit, because that's all that this really is. You've heard it from Alexis, you heard it from Anna. Advanced recycling is a myth. It is nothing but an industry advertising scheme. And it's really important that folks understand that, because we have a lot of members, elected officials in state legislatures, members of Congress, folks who would be traditional allies of ours who have drunk the Kool-Aid on this industry scheme. So Alexis touched on it a little bit. This is really about blaming the consumer again, right? For 30 plus years, the industry has been saying, like, we need to recycle our way out of the problem. The plastic pollution is a litter issue, right? If folks would just learn how to manage their waste properly, right? And this the same thing with so-called chemical recycling, right? They're wanting to keep the onus for plastic pollution on the consumer. They've been doing it for 30 plus years. And for 30 plus years, believe it or not, the industry has been working to scale so-called chemical and advanced recycling facilities. And for 30 years, they have failed to prove that these technologies are environmentally benign, technologically feasible, or economically viable. And the reality is that industry is not trying to create a market for recycled mixed waste plastic as much as they're trying to create a market to recover mixed waste plastic, burn it in order to incentivize petrochemical expansion. So again, a little bit of a refresher on some of what you heard earlier. Again, this is all advertising. It's all PR. Over the last 30 years, the industry started out calling it chemical conversion, and then they moved on to chemical recycling, and then they came up with advanced recycling. And now we're actually starting to hear the industry use the phrase molecular recycling. So on the left side of the screen, we've got these quote unquote plastic to fuel technologies. And for all intents and purposes, when the industry talks about quote unquote advanced recycling, they're mostly referring to pyrolysis and gasification technologies, right? These are the most prominent technologies that industry is applying to mix plastic waste in an attempt to recycle it. But the reality is the only thing that's being recycled are toxic chemicals. On the right hand of the screen, you'll see plastic technologies. These are some of the more kind of untried, untested, nascent technologies, basically using really caustic chemical solvents and pressure to break down plastic monomers or polymers rather into their monomer constituents. Highly toxic process, even more of a pipe dream than what is being put forth with pyrolysis and gasification incineration. So really quick, like the US landscape, this is what it looks like. It's really important to contextualize that the 1990 amendments to the Clean Air Act explicitly state that pyrolysis and gasification units are classified and regulated as incinerators under Section 129 of the Clean Air Act. That's already law, right? And what the industry is trying to do right now is exempt pyrolysis and gasification incinerators from Section 129. This would be an unprecedented move for the EPA to delist a major source category of pollution, right? So think about it. EPA says, okay, pyrolysis and gasification incinerators are no longer incinerators. What's to stop the steel industry from coming in and saying we don't want copper smelters to be regulated by Section 129? Cement kilns don't need to be regulated by Section 129. So it's an extremely dangerous and unprecedented ploy that's being pushed by the American Chemistry Council. So that's a very specific rulemaking that is taking place that the EPA is currently kind of examining, for lack of a better word. Parallel, there is a rulemaking around the municipal waste combustor rule, right? So the EPA, by law, is supposed to upgrade their standards, their emission standards for municipal waste combustors every 5 years. They haven't done it for about 15 now. The Sierra Club is suing EPA to update these standards. And what we need is for the EPA to update these standards by May of 2024. The reason it needs to happen before May of 2024 is that's the way that we would avoid a congressional review act, right? So if the decision for municipal waste combustor ruling came after May 2024, what would happen is you would see congressional members in states where there's a high concentration of incinerators, they would get together and they would try to overturn the ruling. So that there's two rulemakings that are happening in parallel with the EPA. And it's really important to understand that that's kind of the backdrop to this work that we're doing at the federal level with pyrolysis and gasification incinerators. And then of course, as you heard with Anna, state legislatures, right? There's already 20 active reclassification laws on the books in the United States. For the 2022-2023 legislative session, there's currently 9 bills pending, right? This is a snapshot of a really great new legislative alert from Gaia. I'd be happy to share it afterwards, kind of goes into a little bit more detail into what the industry is doing with these so-called reclassification bills. These are some of the movement interventions that we are undertaking at Break Free. So the real thing we're trying to do is shift the narrative around so-called chemical recycling, right? Pyrolysis and gasification are incineration technologies. There is no recycling being done whatsoever. If anything is being recycled, it's toxic chemicals into our air and into the water. Again, we're pressuring the EPA to make firm and quick decisions on those 2 rules that I mentioned, right? The one referring to pyrolysis and gasification incinerator, and the second one referring to municipal waste combustors. We're fighting we're working for state preemption laws in a number of friendly states. And then of course, we're supporting local organizations on the ground who are conducting site fights. And as was said by both of our guests here, as plastics and petrochemicals are the fossil fuel industry's plan B, right? As we work to decarbonize the transportation and energy sector, fossil fuel industry is looking at petrochemicals as their saving grace, right? And we cannot rely on recycling to get ourselves out of the plastic pollution crisis. So again, our primary objectives at Break Free right now is really focused on that federal front. We're working at the state, we're working on the ground in local communities, but if we can really pressure the EPA to withdraw the Trump-era proposal to exempt pyrolysis and gasification incinerators from Section 129 of the Clean Air Act. That will significantly hobble the industry's plan to create regulatory certainty that would allow them to proliferate a kind of new network of plastic incinerators across the country. And then again, that second objective of ours is to update the emission standards for municipal waste combustors by May 2024 in order to avoid a Congressional Review Act. I went through a lot, I went through it fast, but I want to stop there because I know some folks have some questions. But again, my name is Graham, and would love to have you all reach out. If you're interested, I'll drop my name and email in the chat. But with that, I'll turn it back over to Luis. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Graham. And that last graphic, gosh, that was really just something else. Thank you very much for sharing. And thank you to all our speakers. I'm going to actually hand it over to Lori Zuner, who is amazing, and she's going to run the Q&A section for us. So if you have questions, like now is the time to ask them. So Lori, I'll hand it off to you. You can give instructions and just go however you want to do this.
Okay. Am I on?
Yeah, you are on.
Okay, because I just lost the whole screen. I can't see anything anymore.
I think
Looks
so.
like-
So you just shared your screen. Unless you have like a PowerPoint, you probably don't really have to share it, because if not, it's just I think it's gonna slow everything down.
Yeah, I'd rather not. Okay, let me take it
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
Okay.
There we go. Now you're back.
Yeah, I had gone to the chat and I didn't really see any questions, which is really amazing, because most webinars that I go to, there's just like fast and furious comments and questions going on the chat. And I think that it's probably because people were just really absorbed in the presentations so much, which is really great. Yeah, you can either, post your questions in the chat, or if you raise your hand, I'll try to see if I can see your hand raised. Ani just asked what would be the strategy to fight the demo project that's in Los Lunas. And I think that we went into that a little bit with what Anna and Graham had said about probably talking to our first voting, definitely, to make sure that we retain our environmental champions in our state legislature. And also Michelle Lujan Grisham, even though she supported this, she still is an environmental advocate and has been very responsive to us in the past. So I will say that. But does Alexis or Graham or Anna want to say anything else about that?
I think Solera wants to respond to that.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Solera Hughes with Moms Clean Air Force. I just wanted to make sure that we understand that the plant that is in Las Lunas is a demonstration plant. So it is set up for people who are interested in owning a plastic gas plant of their own to come look at it. If you visit their website, they have this kind of sold as, you can come see this, see how it works, and then you can buy a facility like this anywhere you want to set it up. It has a small footprint. You can put it in a warehouse. So what the plant there is not actually going to be producing, but what it is hopefully, yeah, it's kind of like a model home, exactly. So hopefully what we can do at this stage is to say that we don't want people to be, you know, buying these facilities and setting them up all over New Mexico, especially without any kind of understanding of what they are doing, and the pollution that is coming out of this. So we're at very early stages in New Mexico. And one of the big questions I think we'll have to ask is the way that the plant is being sold is highly greenwashed as being environmentally friendly. And a lot of people could be, you know, in some ways kind of duped into thinking that this looks like a great solution, people who should be on our side. So we need to be having conversations with people about what these plants really mean and, you know, what our concerns are, and really taking back some of that narrative of the environmental harms of burning plastics, because that is not, if you look at their site, and we can put the link in, it really makes it look like, you know, they're complying with everything. This is fine, because they're in this gray area. And so, you know, I think one of the unique things about this is that a lot of people we talk to will be naturally aligned with us and maybe interested in these plants because they think this is a solution to plastic waste. So it's a big conversation to have, and the more people we can have it with, the better off we are.
Thank you. Can I just clarify? So you're thinking that we would kind of fight this at the state legislature rather than like the village council or something more local in Los Lunas. So it's much more like statewide.
What we are seeing in other states is that this becomes state legislation to have these exemptions. We've seen those 20 states already that have done this. So we do not yet know of or have flagged legislation that is being proposed next year. But this will be coming because there are going to be a lot of, you know, if it goes through at the national level, especially, we're going to see a lot of these state level legislation bills to have this exemption from the Clean Air Act. So this is definitely something we should be talking to all of our elected officials at the state level, as well as at the local level, so that people are aware of what this really is and that we need to stop it before it starts.
Great, thanks, Delora. I think Graham Hamilton wanted to weigh in on this too. Graham?
Yeah, just agree with everything that Solera said. And, you know, it really is, I think that the most accessible point of entry for folks is building literacy where you're at. If you're working on the ground in a local community, build literacy with the decision makers in that community. If you're working in state legislature, build literacy within the folks who are making decisions at the state level. But as Solera said, you know, a lot of people have been duped. I mean, colleagues of mine, you know, when we were really organizing around this work, had been duped a little bit as well, you know, because I think folks understand the scale of the problem and folks are hungry for a solution. And the industry has done an amazing job of spinning this technology as a viable solution. So I think it's really first and foremost about building literacy and then creating opportunities for potential state legislation, which is something that movement members at Break Free are working on.
Okay, now I heard, I'm looking at a question from Kurt Anderson in the chat. What is the chemical composition of the waste? I assume it's mostly carbon dioxide. Plastics are mainly hydrogen and carbon with traces of nitrogen, sulfur, oxygen, chlorine, fluorine. Do we know what the chemical composition of the waste is? Anybody?
So
Alexis?
it's, yeah, so the issue with plastics is that they have thousands of chemicals added to them that are called plasticizers, and they give plastics their desirable characteristics like being malleable, color, UV protection, and flame retardation, because as I mentioned, plastics burn very well. So those chemicals are what are of concern because as we saw, they can cause serious health problems. So it is impossible to know what chemicals are in your plastic because they're not just, I'm sorry, I think someone's vacuuming. It's impossible to know what's basically in the plastic because there's no disclosure of the chemicals that are added. Very few chemicals are banned. And they're all mixed together. So this is the issue we see also with mechanical recycling, is that household plastic waste is all mixed together. It's all mixed materials. So you have like plastic film mixed with like tin foil, mixed with paper, and it's not easily separated and it's contaminated. So it's a hodgepodge, and we do need like better labeling laws and accountability and disclosure laws about what's in the plastic, and we need to ban toxins from plastic.
All right, great. Thanks for that, Alexis. Let's see. Someone is asking about recycling of other non-plastic things like paper, cardboard, glass. Are those still viable to be recycled even though plastic isn't? Anybody?
Yes, they are. And we strongly support recycling for other materials. It's plastic itself that is not recyclable. So we're starting to hear the big plastic industry say that recycling is under attack. The environmentalists are attacking recycling, and that's not what's happening. It's that plastic is not recyclable, and it's actually causing problems for recycling other materials because it's contaminating the recycling stream. And so materials that could be recycled and have a new use are being landfilled or incinerated because they can't be separated from all this contaminated plastic.
Okay, Jean wants to know how other countries are dealing with plastic wastes.
I'll jump in really quickly. It kind of depends on what country you're talking about. Most countries in the global north are shipping it to countries in the global south. So what we're talking about is a form of waste colonialism, where and there's this whole kind of complex superstructure of how waste goes from one country to another to and makes its way into these poor communities in the global south that don't have any type of infrastructure to manage the waste that they're receiving. And in countries like the US and Canada, countries in the EU, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. But a great kind of there have been a series of documentaries ever since the story of plastic came out a couple of years ago that do really great investigative journalism about how countries are managing their own plastic waste, as well as countries who are having to deal with plastic waste that is being put upon them. I don't know if Alexis or Solera or Anna has anything else to add there.
I would just say that there's no country that's dealing with plastic waste well, because there's no way to deal with it that doesn't have additional ramifications. So whether you're burning it, landfilling it, whatever you're doing with it, it's causing pollution and it never goes away. So.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Ron wants to know that what happens when you try to burn Teflon?
Not good things.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't want to know.
I mean, since it has a lot of PFAS, which is basically what Teflon is, I can imagine it would be very
so yeah,
damaging.
here's the thing about PFAS is it's very hydrophilic. It loves water and it does not burn well. It's actually the compound that's in firefighting foam, which is like what they use to put out jet fuel fires and stuff. So it does not burn well. And when you burn, there's thousands of different types of PFAS. It's a whole family of molecules. And so when you burn them, you get additional subtypes of these molecules, and there are chemical reactions that are unknown and have unknown effects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to jump in. I have a question. I happened to join the Zoom webinar for the Municipal Waste Association's meeting, and they had a lot of industry speakers from the American Chemical Council, ExxonMobil, Cyclix, and then also a waste MRF executive from Houston, and then Kate Daly from the policy director of EcoCycle in Colorado. But what I found interesting was that Joshua, what was his name? Josh Baca, the vice president of plastics at the American Chemical Council, was saying that the American Chemical Council does not think that plastics to fuel any longer is recycling, and that they're now moving toward plastics to plastics, which I found very interesting. Have Graham or Alexis, have you heard anything about their sort of change in strategy, and what do you make of it?
I'll jump in real quick and say, I think the American Chemistry Council is now saying that they don't believe, quote unquote, advanced recycling should be inclusive of plastic to fuel technologies. I think part of why they're saying that is because of the pressure that has been mounting over the last year by organizations like Moms and Beyond Plastic and Sierra Club and a whole host of others. You know, it's part of the same paradigm of kind of shifting the name of what they're calling it. First, it was chemical conversion. That didn't sound right to consumers, so they went to chemical recycling, then advanced. So, you know, they're pivoting all over the place, I think, because what they're dealing with does not work. And they understand that the more consumer awareness there is around what they're trying to do, the more they're being forced to backpedal and backstep what it is that they're proposing, right? Because all they've been able to achieve, and not to scale, but at the exploratory phase, is plastic to fuel applications using pyrolysis and gasification. They have not figured out how to do plastic to plastic using pyrolysis and gasification, and they've been trying for 30 plus years.
Right. Okay, thanks for that. Back to more questions. So what should we be doing? Should we be writing to the EPA, working locally? Is one more important than the other?
I think local organizing is really important. I think educating your legislators and decision makers about not falling for this trap, this solution that sounds really good, and telling them that there are better solutions to deal with plastic waste, including plastic bans, like plastic bag bans, polystyrene bans, and extended producer responsibility. They don't need to fall for this plastic burning scheme. If you want to protect your local community, that is the best way to go. They have the most direct control over it. The EPA decision is still going to be a while in coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're almost out of time. But gosh, there's so many questions in the chat. I think probably a good way to do it. I will forward all of your guys' email address, if you don't mind, for all three of you to the Climate
Sorry,
Corp
Luis,
listserv.
there's
yeah.
actually only two more. So these are a lot of comments. One of them was just like if we should continue to recycle or is it better to put plastic in the trash? So that's a big one that I think would
Yeah,
we should
yeah.
probably
Let's go
get.
ahead and take that one, and then for anybody else that has questions, I mean, I'm not volunteering you guys, but feel free to reach out to any three of them. I think hopefully they'd be happy to answer your questions. But I think yeah, that's a really good question, Antoinette.
Okay.
I would just quickly say that it depends on your municipality, right? Like really it's a patchwork in the United States. There is not one uniform system, which is part of the problem. So whatever is acceptable in your community, I think it's safe to follow those guidelines and do the best you can. Obviously, minimize the amount of waste that you're consuming, but it's virtually impossible, folks. Like we've had our choices taken away from us. So it's really about doing the best you can, educating yourself, building literacy in your community. And I think it's important too, when we're talking about recycling, we should also be talking about petrochemical expansion, right? Because we've been operating on this linear paradigm for years, and it's gotten us to the place that we're at, and industry wants to keep it that way. So we really have to tell that full circle story of what the waste and disposal is doing for the expansion of production upstream.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I want to give Alexis or Anna, either of you, or Graham as well, but you just spoke. If any of you three have any final words for anybody that's watching.
Actually, yes. Everybody's asking about the chemicals that are releasing from this plastic incineration. Is just chemicals. As you know, we have a lot of gases that we have in the environment, and it's a lot of them, they cannot be even named. So it's the only thing that comes to my mind is something really bad that we are breathing, and we cannot allow our members of Congress and our local decision makers to have this in our communities. We cannot go from this petrochemical industry killing us with this kind of different gases. So that's what I wanted to say. Something really bad.
Thank you. Alexis, did you have any last words you wanted to share?
This isn't the end, and I know there's going to be some organizing follow-up focused on plastic gas after this meeting. So please share this NRDC report with this list, and share this with everybody you know in New Mexico, and kind of spread the word about plastic gas. So because there's going to be some mobilization happening, I believe.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And again, thank you to all three of you, as well as thank you to Lori for managing our Q&A. We as you all know, we have these Climate Corp meetings usually every other Thursday. The next one, actually no, there will be one before the Thanksgiving weekend. So we will have one more in a couple of weeks. But thank you so much for being here, everyone. Really appreciate you. And yeah, feel free to reach out to any of these three if you have any more questions. But thank you so much, everyone. Have a good rest of your.
Hello. You could reach out to me too, Lori. I put my email, or I tried to put my email in the chat. I've misspelled it a couple of times. So, but I think you can make out that it's lzunner@hotmail.com. So that if you have any questions for the Plastic Action Team of New Mexico, if you want to join our team, we'd love to have you. or the Moms Clean Air Force, you know, to get active on this issue. And yeah, and then also to share recordings of this session with as many people as possible. So thanks a lot, Luis.
Yeah, and again, like actually you just reminded me of something, and just what Alexis was saying is like, this is not over, like, you know, so we're going to be working on some, hopefully some legislation in New Mexico, having to do more with plastic bags. But you know, I mean, there's so much that needs to be done, right? It's not like there's like one size fits all. Like there's so much that needs to be done to fight this issue. But thank you so much, everyone. Hope you all have a good rest of your day, and yeah, let's keep the conversation going. Have a great rest of your Thursday.
All
Bye,
right.
everybody.
Bye.